your Honda V6 making this sound, a lot of places will tell you it needs a motor. I'm here to tell you today that it's just a timing belt tensioner located down here. That right there is your timing belt tensioner. They're hydraulic filled and they also have a spring tensioner as backup. When they leak, the hydraulic oil comes out, and that's when you start hearing that knocking noise because you're relying strictly on spring tension. In this video, I'll show you how to access it, replace it, and quiet up your engine. Step 1, remove the engine cover. Should just pull up and have 4 of these rubber grommets. Sometimes they stick on the stud. A little bit of white lube and they'll go right back on. Let's talk tools real quick. You really don't need too many tools to get this job done. Something as simple as a few swivel sockets. Everything is going to be a 17, 14, or 12. Your number 110 mil on 1/4 inch drive. Never use anything bigger than that because you'll break it. A 14, 12 point, long reach 1/4 inch, a couple air ratchets, 3/8, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch ratchet with about a 12 inch extension, an assortment of 19 millimeters, thin wall for the wheels, a 19 standard just to roll over the motor, and we'll talk about this weighted guy when we get to him, 1/2 inch to 3/8 adapter, and a various assortment of impact guns. I like the stubby gun here for low clearance areas, and then my big gun I use to get the crank bolt off, and then 17 and a 14 wrench. Can't forget your panel pop tool to remove any types of clips for wire harnesses, and then you can always use a right angle pick for the same thing. One thing I like to do when I'm getting into this job is move the PCM out of the way. It looks like somebody's already moved it. This bracket should really be up here and line up with this bolt hole here. We'll just find a bolt that fit in there, nothing big deal. And then there is another 10 mil right down there between the coolant reservoir and that connector. In order to get this PCM completely out after you remove the 10 mil fasteners, is you got to remove one of these connectors. You basically just push down on the tab, pull towards you, and it falls down. As it pulls towards you, it should automatically unplug. It's just kind of hard to do one-handed, so there it is. This is why I like using the stubby gun, because you can just fit this in here. Now you don't have to support the motor because there are 2 motor mounts in the front and in the rear. This just isolates a little bit of vibration, so we can take this bracket out of the way without having to put a jack stand or anything under the engine to support it. Now, that first one I took out of the motor mount in the front here in this portion was a 17. These 2 at the top where you can see my socket is that one in the back is a 14, and that one's also 14. So let's get these out. Now just fish that bracket up out of the way. And the next thing we're going to have to take off after we take the timing cover off is this block here, but we'll get to that. One thing I do like to do at this point is loosen up the bolts on that block I mentioned earlier. There should be 3 14 millimeter bolts. You could get to 2 of them up at the top. One is here, and then the other one is recessed inside. The reason why I use this 1/4 inch long reach ratchet is because on the older models you don't really have a whole lot of room here between the body and that block, so you try to use something thin that'll fit in there, but those are pretty tight, so just keep that in mind. Once you got those 2 14s at the top loose, there's a 10 mil right here that holds a harness. You might as well get that out of the way while you're in here. There's a 10 millimeter bolt here. I like to take that out. What that'll do is allow you to pivot this harness up and out of the way of the timing cover. It's also 400 feet long. Yeah, it sounds crunchy, but it's fine. At this point, you should be ready to take off your upper timing covers. There's 5 10 mils. 1, 2, 3. The fourth one is buried down there, and the fifth one is recessed into the cover. And basically the same thing for the one in the rear, except there is a harness routed right over the top, right here, which just simply pulls out like that, and then you can tuck it behind the cover to get it out of your way. Just like that. Alright, so we got the one cover off. I just wanted to show you. There is a rubber O-ring style seal here. This doesn't seal any type of oil or any type of fluid. Basically what it does is keep dust, moisture, and any type of small debris out of the timing belt to keep it safe. But this is basically what your front cover looks like. It's going to have your engine code and some serial numbers on it. It'll also explain to you the automatic timing belt tensioner and a few of the service procedures in multiple languages. These are what the bolts look like. They have a pretty large shoulder on them here, and they're pretty short with a nice flange. The reason for that is because of how thick the cover itself is. Now, with this cover off, you can kind of get a hint at why I'm telling you the tensioner is bad and why it's making that noise. That is bad. You should not see any play here on the tensioner side specifically. This is the side on the crank, which is still tight, so luckily, because it's a cog belt, that is why it's staying in time. So once I pull that rear cover off, I'll give you a look at that, and then we'll get the rest of it apart and show you the tensioner itself. So I got both front and rear upper covers off. At this point, we're going to take the outer serpentine belt off. Relatively easy to do if you were just doing a serpentine belt. It's a 17 millimeter, hexagon shape, kind of like a bolt. Sorry for the poor view. And you're going to get your wrench on there and just push towards the firewall of the vehicle, and it relieves tension. And then you can pull the belt off however you like. I always recommend changing these outer belts when you're doing the timing belt. It's got to come apart anyway. So what I did was I relieved tension, scooped it out from underneath the smooth idler pulley on the tensioner, and then you just kind of pull it off all your other accessories, kind of scoop it around. Sorry. And then it comes, relatively right out if you have two hands and you're not trying to film the video. But there's that. I'm going to take a quick second to kind of show you why you want to replace these serpentine belts. You can see these cracks in the groove here, and then also a lot of deposits of debris in between the ribs. Basically these cracks are an indication that the rubber itself is starting to fail and that the nylon woven belt is starting to fray and come apart. If you look hard enough, you can kind of see, starting to fray on the outer edge here. Anyway, this is at risk for breaking. And if this does break, you'll lose, basically on this car, just your alternator and your AC compressor drive. But yeah, that's not what your serpentine belt should look like. Quick note, whenever you're jacking up or supporting a vehicle, you always want to use factory lift points. On this specific vehicle and pretty much every other Honda, they have these pinch weld brackets. So I get a nice sturdy jack stand and put it right underneath that to keep the car from falling down and crushing and killing me, essentially. Now we're going to pull off the wheel. And this is our thin wall socket, so we don't mar up the wheel any more than it already is. Another good reason to have your panel pop tool out while you're doing this job is because they're supposed to be push pin clips that hold this inner fender and this engine shield back in. But as you can see, somebody worked on this previously, didn't put all the clips back in, and this has been rubbing on the tire and kind of ate this whole thing away. We'll have to reach out to the customer, see if they want to go ahead and replace this, but for now, what I'm going to do is when I put it back together, I'll secure it the best I can. But let's get the remaining pieces of this out of the way so we can continue with the job. This is essentially what the clip looks like in two pieces. You have this lower portion here which is flared out so that when you push this upper portion in, those expand and cause it to lock in place. You have these two flats on either side. There are multiple tools to take these apart, a pair of pliers, you could use a flathead. What I typically like to do is get the panel pop tool underneath it, you know, pry it up with one edge of the tool, and then put the fork portion of it and pull this out. So essentially when this is open, these are collapsible. When this is closed, these are locked in place. So these do break pretty often. So be prepared to replace them and break them. You know, they're not really that big of a deal. You could buy them at the parts store. You know, so just be prepared to have those in stock. So now this is the part where I mentioned earlier the weighted crank socket comes in handy. This bolt here is a couple 100 foot-pounds tight in the crank. There is a special tool from Honda that would sit inside here, and then you would hold a long bar for leverage to hold the motor in place and use a breaker bar to break it loose. But these weighted crank sockets, you know, no pun intended, are worth their weight in gold. You put them on there and it exemplifies the inertia and the mass so that it comes out relatively easy. I still like to use a stronger gun. So now you're not going to use that to tighten it, but just definitely to loosen it. So now that comes out. You definitely don't want to oil these threads because it will not torque properly. In here you can see your keyway. You don't want to lose that. So now the damper should just pull off. Okay. Now with that out of the way, don't forget this guy. A nice little magnet comes in handy to pull him out. Get a magnet in there. Boom. Now this is a very important piece here. What this little spacer does is it may not look like much, but it holds the belt in place from walking off, basically, because there is no flange on that lower crank gear. So that belt will come off and you'll be having a bad day. So what I like to do so I don't forget it is I put it in front of the crank. This way I know that this has to go on first, then the damper, and then obviously your bolt. If you mix that up, again, you're going to be having a bad day. So now you kind of get a look at the lower timing cover. You got a couple 10 mils all around there. We still have to take the serpentine belt tensioner off, and then you'll have a bit of a better view. So let's just get through it and see what we find. Okay, so this is your lower timing cover. There should be 7 of those same timing cover bolts. See all the holes here. I did lie real quick. You can cheat the cover out without taking the tensioner off, which makes this a lot easier because there's an 8mm Allen in there, which technically is a pain in the butt to take out. But once you got that out,
can I talk?
Now you got this upper motor mount bracket that we still have to take out.
Can I talk now?
Go ahead. Got the shop foreman out here just inspecting to make sure we're doing a good job.
And then we got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 bolts here that we needed screw take out. And then we need to take this off. That's the, what's this called?
The brake caliper.
We have to take the brake caliper off, either to get a new brake caliper on.
That's if we were doing brakes, but today we're doing a timing belt.
Yeah.
So those upper 2 motor mounts bolts are 14, just like this lower one. That's why we're going to use this long flat wrench here. That's how you access this lower one. The upper 2 we use the swivel head 1/4 inch. And once all 3 of these are loose, we'll be able to sneak this out at the top.
Can I talk now? When all these bolts loose, the bracket can come out of the top. And then we see this timing belt here, and it has a little thing in it. Along with these little grips. See these little grips?
There's the 3/14s.
And
we'll leave this right up here.
You know, grease in them, so we gotta get this grease out with the sparklers, and then this is nice and smooth.
So we finally got access to the timing belt. Everything is clearly visible. You can see here That is a lot of tension. That is not good. This is your tensioner pulley over here. What we're going to do next is we're going to line up the marks. Sorry about that. What you're going to see is these pulleys are labeled for cylinder number for top dead center. You're looking for cylinder 1 with this tick mark. And then that is going to go up to the top here. You'll see a little tick mark there. And then the one in the rear should have the same tick mark there, and that'll do the same exact thing. Line up at 12 o'clock. And the lower crank pulley will also have a small arrow that aligns similar to the keyway, and you're going to line that up to that mark there on the oil pump case. Alright, so now we're going to rotate the motor over to make sure that the timing marks line up. My assistant is getting the 1/2-inch ratchet with the 12-inch extension and the standard 19mm socket ready for us. Perfect. Now you can see I already put the crank bolt back in, just hand tightened, and it will tighten slightly until we can rotate the motor over. Okay, so now that it's tight, once I turn this ratchet, it will rotate the crank, which will then turn the upper cam pulleys here. So just keep in mind that it's like these will rotate twice as fast as the crank will. So, you know, it's something like for every 180 degrees you get on the crank rotation, you're going to get 360 out of these. We're basically 180 out as of right now. So let's just roll the motor over and see what we get. Alright, so we rolled the motor over. Typically I don't mark these with any type of marker or pen, just because I've done so many of them, you gotta get to know where they're at. But I marked it so you can see it clearly in the video. We're lined up here. And now, you know, it's just a perspective. If you look at it this way, it is lined up 100%. But you'll never be a half a tooth off, only one tooth. And you don't want to be any bit off. If you're one tooth off in one direction, you'll have a rich code. If you're a tooth off in the other direction, you'll have a lean code, just basically because of the way the valves are opening and closing. You can see the mark there, sort of. So now, I can finally show you definitive proof of the noise. As you can see here, the belt is now loose. I did not pull the tensioner off, but here is your noise. Now obviously as the motor is rotating, that's going to be moving at a higher rate of speed, sounding slightly more severe. And as stated earlier, the tensioner has failed, so the pulley is just bouncing against the body of the tensioner. Typically at this point, you would have to relieve tension off the tensioner to pull the belt. But since the tensioner is already bad, we can just take it right off. And always take it off on the tensioner side, roll it up, and we're going to roll this down.
And we're going to see if you have any gas in this.
Well, there shouldn't be gas in there, that's coolant. If you got gas in there, you got a problem.
And we're going to see if there's coolant, any coolant in here. Wait, can you see coolant? You can see if the belt is trying to fly because the strings are coming out.
So typical construction of a belt, very similar to a serpentine belt. This is a cog belt. But again, as the foreman said, as these start to fail, you see some fraying on the sides of the belt. You can see like the fuzzy pieces. This one wasn't quite ready to break, but we're replacing the tensioner. So while we're in there, we're going to go ahead and do it. This car has 150,000 miles on it. Factory recommends about every 90K for the belt as general maintenance. This customer, because they're halfway through the interval for a second time, wishes to do the water pump, so we're going to tackle that while we have it apart as well. So this right here is your oil pressure sender. That does need to be removed so we can access the tensioner. So we're just going to go ahead and pop that out, and then we can pull the tensioner out and look at it on the bench. So I usually just use an adjustable on this just to break it loose. It's not very tight, but once it does come out, it will leak a little bit of oil if the car was just running. So just make sure you have a drain pan handy underneath just to catch whatever comes out, if anything comes out. There you go. So it's just this little guy here. You definitely want to try to keep any type of contaminants getting in that little hole down there. So I store them plug side down, just out of the way on a bench. Basically, your tensioner is a 10 mil here, and then one right above it. So now with that out of the way, we can get it out, and we'll take a look and see what failed on it while this is draining. This is your timing belt tensioner. There is a spring inside there. There is hydraulic oil, or there was at some point. You can see this one has been leaking quite a while. There is a section on here, let me get a pic, that you can see is dished because it has been banging around on that tensioner lever for quite some time. With this snap ring here, we can take that out, and I could show you that the seal failed and that there's nothing left, but what we're going to do is we're going to put the car back together first. The next step in this whole process here is we're going to take the arm out. The tensioner arm has to come out. This is terrible focus. So we just have to get this one 14 millimeter off, and that'll be out of the way for the water pump. And then also another 14 down here for this idler. Those two are pretty tight. What I typically use is a flat wrench, that flat 14 I used earlier on the motor mount bracket. And once they are loose, they kind of thread right out because it's fine thread. This is the tensioner arm off the vehicle. There's a little collar here. Be sure not to lose that because it will come out. This is the 15. And this is the area in which the tensioner contacts. You can see that this is dished. This should be flat and smooth, but because it has been knocking against this, it just wore over time, basically machining it down. It will survive. It won't affect it too much. I mean, if this ear was broken off, then we would replace it, but it'll survive. I've seen way worse than that. So this is the idler pulley for the timing belt. Just wanted to show you the bolt. It's pretty neat looking. It's recessed in there. This just sits on a little nub on the water pump down there, and your tensioner arm goes right here. I'll show you on the new water pump and the old water pump once we get it out. Just real quick also, when you are doing these water pumps or timing belt and you're not sure if it has failed, right here is what's called a weep hole. When they start to show signs of crust or corrosion in there, that's typically an indication that coolant is leaking past that main seal. And that'll be about the only way you're going to tell that this thing is leaking, unless it fails completely, and then this whole area will be drenched in like a white corrosion-looking crust. Sometimes you won't see it unless you take it all the way apart. So if you do have a coolant leak and you can't find it anywhere else, this is a good place to look. So that's held on by about 5-10 mils. We're going to rip that off, and I'll show it to you on the bench. We are going to have to remove this water pump, and there are two dowels. One's here. There's another at the top. So what I like to do is put this in that little weep hole and kind of just pry out, and it'll start to leak. You're basically just going to let that drain out until there's nothing left. You're draining the whole block, so you'll probably go through about 1.5 gallons, almost 2 gallons. If you look at the color of the coolant, you will notice that this vehicle's coolant system has been serviced previously, and it looks like they put the incorrect coolant in there, judging by the color. Honda uses blue coolant with different corrosion inhibitors than whatever this vehicle has in it right now. This looks more like a universal or almost like a goldish color.
Green.
Is it green?
It's green slime, looks like.
It does look pretty slimy. So we'll just apply a little bit more pressure on that.
It's
Get a nice green waterfall going here. Once that drains out, we'll pop it off and get ready to put the new one on. This is what the inside of your water pump looks like. That's the impeller. That circulates the coolant as the belt drives the pulley on the front. This right here is one of the dowel pins that helps locate and line it up on the engine block. Here's the secondary one. This hole and this hole is a part of that motor mount bracket. Earlier on in the video, you saw me take a 10 mil off the top. That goes into there. This lower portion here is where the idler pulley lives. And this dowel here is this very large dowel with a threaded boss is where your tensioner arm lives. So that is essentially your water pump. These are our box of parts. Now, I strongly recommend you use OE parts on a repair like this. You never want to use anything aftermarket. The OE made it this long. You figure the aftermarket isn't going to make it half as long in my experience. So we have all Honda parts in here, Honda coolant. Everything is genuine OE. I do not use aftermarket parts unless I'm in a pinch. This is your new tensioner versus old. Obviously, here's your old leaky boy that was making a bunch of noise and is mechanically bound up. Here's your new tensioner. That is what that seal is supposed to look like. You can see that this also has a rounded surface. It is not dished. And this pin here holds the tensioner arm itself in place. Once this is installed, you will remove this, kind of like a grenade pin, but not nearly as explosive. That's your brand new Honda water pump. I failed to mention earlier that there is an O-ring seal on there. When you buy OE, it comes factory installed. That's that black rubber that is going around the rim of the pump. Flip that over for me, please. It basically just looks the same. That's about it. Let's throw it in the car. Water pump nestled and tucked into its nice little home there with the tensioner arm and the idler pulley installed.
Dada, what did you do to clean
The surface of the water pump?
the surface of the water pump?
That's an excellent question, Autumn. There really is no surface prep because it is a machine surface. So you kind of just wipe it off with like a smooth, clean red rag, maybe use some brake clean on it. As long as there's no corrosion, the O-ring does the rest of the work. You do not need to use silicone on this style water pump. All right, we got the belt back on. What I like to do is I get it lined up down here at the bottom, and I'll pull the belt up and keep it taut all the way around. Pull it tight, and you want to make sure that you're locking each one of these cogs into its groove. Run it down, around, up and over into your rear cam here, which is technically bank 1. And then you're going to leave all your slack on the back here on the tensioner side. So this way, when we put that tensioner in and we pull that pin, it will push this pulley up and keep tension on the belt, eliminating that knocking noise we were hearing earlier. One thing I always advise before you pull the tensioner is you want to double check your marks. Again, that one back there is kind of hard to see, but basically in the 12 o'clock position is where you want all your marks. Same down here on the crank.
Is it nighttime?
It is not nighttime.
How do you know?
Because I could look out the window and see that it is daytime. Tensioner back in. I forgot to mention earlier that does use 2 very specific black 10mm bolts. But you'll know once you pull them out. You can see the pin is still installed. So we're going to go over to the box. I like to use a pair of needle nose pliers that have like sharp edges like a cutter on them. And that grips that pin fairly well. This way you can kind of work at it and pry it out a little at a time. Basically, you're going to grip the tensioner, pry at it, It's a little hard to do one-handed while you're filming. Okay. Here it is. And for whatever reason, I save them, put them in the graveyard, all the rest. We go back to the car. What we should see is a nice tight belt, tight on every side. You want a little bit of deflection, but not much. Again, double check your marks. 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. And we're ready to go. We can start putting it back together. Next video, this will be running. Timing cover back on. Don't forget our little spacer, because we don't want the belt to slip off and jump time and potentially damage the engine. And now we're going to put our damper pulley back on. That slides in place like that. Our bolt. And that can be run on the rest of the way with the gun, and then it'll get torqued. We got the car all reassembled. I did, as I mentioned earlier in the video, replace this 10mm for the customer and reroute this bracket in the correct manner. One other thing that I touched on was this inner fender liner. I did reach out to the customer. They do not wish to have it repaired, so I kind of just put it back in place the best I could, replace some of the broken clips, but obviously there is a large gaping hole here, and there is quite a bit of damage underneath. You know, as things like that happen, these are some things you may run into. So the next step of the process is we're going to fill it up with coolant, because as you remember, we did take the water pump off, which drains out the block. I find that this style funnel is probably the best way to bleed all the air out, and honestly the least messy as far as filling it goes. This cap, and you can buy these on Amazon or anywhere else in the world. Any tool truck should have it. There's a number of different caps that fit inside the radiator. And there's a little rubber O-ring that seals against the neck of the radiator. It's a nice tight fit. This goes in, and when you pour it in, all the air bubbles come out. Again, this is a Honda, so I do always recommend using OE parts, especially certain fluids, as it does have the correct corrosion inhibitors. And it is made for the vehicle. If they put it, you know, the engineers design it a certain way, it's made to go in there for a reason. Go ahead and top it off. As you can see, as I'm pouring it in, the air is working its way out. This acts as like a self-bleeding style funnel. You will likely use more than a gallon if you do wind up removing the water pump. Typically, if you're just doing a drain and fill service, which is due every 60K, you're going to drain the radiator and you're going to fill that up. That'll take about a gallon. Alright, so as that bleeds down, we'll top it off as needed. I try to get, you know, the air pocket to be completely dissipated before I do start the engine. This way you don't run the risk of overheating and burning up a head gasket or anything worse than that. The air pocket seems to be dissipated. So now the moment of truth. Did we fix it? There will be a few more air bubbles working their way out as the engine runs and the coolant circulates. But as you can see, and here I should say. Knocking noise is gone. The vehicle is back to normal, ready for another 150,000 miles of life.